Hey everyone, this is Ellison here joining you from KILROY. Today I'm here to talk to you about our sustainable traveler tips. So these are some tips that I use on every departure and things that I hope we can share that you can integrate into your future trips as well. So let's get going. So before departure, you should definitely consider some sustainable things. And the first is just getting to know the destination you're traveling to. So making sure you're aware of any environmental issues, social, political, economic issues happening at the destination, just so you're mindful of that before you go. Also, a good example of this is, say you're traveling somewhere where water scarcity is a big problem. Maybe you should be aware of this and be more mindful of how many showers you take or how you interact with the natural resources in that destination. So this kind of tip is a bit more complex and something that maybe is out of mind for a lot of people, but it's something we think is really important because how you interact with the local community and local environment is super important as a traveler. The next tip that you should kind of look into before you depart is knowing and being culturally sensitive. So if you're going somewhere where maybe things vary a lot culturally, or you have to cover your shoulders before you enter sacred places, or maybe a hand gesture means something a little different back home than it does in the destination you're visiting, just be aware of these things and realize that the world is a very big place and things do differ depending on where you're going. So a quick Google search of cultural differences in Tanzania or cultural differences in Indonesia can help gain or help give you insight into these either small or large differences that will definitely impact your trip and how you're interacting with people along the way. Next, a good tip that I really use on every single trip is that you should save all of your documents digitally. That way you don't have to be lugging around all of this paper that you're just probably going to throw away or forget about. So just create a Google folder. You can even password encrypt it if you're worried about security, and save all of your important documents. This could include like your insurance coverages, your emergency contacts, your flight tickets, your accommodation, your tour vouchers, all of that fun stuff. Not only does that decrease the waste that you'll be throwing out as you move through the destinations you're visiting, but it's just honestly a super great organized way to keep everything in one place in case you need it. And then if you lose your phone or you lose your computer, you can access these documents from anywhere. So I think that tip is a great tip to use no matter if you're trying to be more sustainable and mindful or whether you're just trying to be a more organized traveler. And then lastly, before you depart, you should consider what you're packing, and you should try to pack as light as possible. This will definitely benefit you as a traveler because you won't have to lug around all of this heavy stuff, but it also reduces the weight on the airplane that you're going to be using, and you're just taking less stuff and generating less waste on your trip. And I definitely love packing light on my trips. Very rarely do you go to a destination where you can't pick something up if you need it. So just make sure you're packing light and being very mindful of what you're taking and what you're going to be throwing away in the destination you're visiting. The next, section of tips that we have is about how to interact and be more mindful and a conscious traveler at your destination. So we can dive into this topic. And we'll start with getting there and getting around. So how you get to your destination matters. And then when you're at your destination, how you move around also really leaves an impact on the environment. So firstly, you should try to choose local transportation when possible. If you are traveling in Europe, maybe consider taking the train, slowing your journey down and getting a feel as you transition through different landscapes, through mountains and valleys to your destination. This also just creates a more meaningful travel experience because you slow down and you really feel that transition as you leave your home and go to your final destination. When we're talking about going a little further away, so maybe not traveling in Europe, be mindful of the type of transportation that you choose to get there. So the good rule of thumb is that you choose as direct as possible flight with as few changes and layovers, and this just reduces the CO2 emissions of your journey. You can also choose to offset your entire travel journey through an offsetting program. Here at KILROY we use My Climate, and it's a great way to kind of neutralize your emissions from transportation. And when you finally arrive at your destination, you should, I guess, try to find the most local ways of getting around. So instead of flying an hour to one destination, see if there are any local buses, see if there are any local trains at your destination, or if you can carpool. There are tons of really unique and local options of getting around when you're at your destination. And I truly find that in those moments when you travel as the locals do, you have more immersive experience and you kind of get that nitty-gritty feeling of what the destination's actually like. So I think, although it is a sustainable tip, it's definitely a tip that just makes your trip a lot better and a lot more exciting. Because, I don't know, maybe you'll be traveling through the mountains and have a delay because a herd of goats is crossing the street, or maybe you'll make friends with a local family, as you go from A to B. So really you can have a lot of fun that way and meet other travelers, meet locals, learn about local customs, stuff like that. Okay, so also when you're at a destination, your money really matters. And this is a really interesting topic because how you spend your money while you're traveling impacts the local economy, impacts local people, local businesses, etc. You get the point. So something I always try to consider when I'm traveling abroad is how it's kind of like a game, how I can keep my money as local as possible. And this can include eating at local restaurants, mom and pop shops, from street vendors, purchasing local goods, local handicrafts made there at the destination, participating in activities that are happening locally. So this maybe could be like a film screening if you're traveling in Melbourne trying to find a local event happening, or purchasing tours and experiences from locals who live and eat and contribute to their local economy. So just trying to be mindful and making sure that you're not going to the chain restaurants or the chain stores, or the super homely kind of experiences that you're used to back home. It will also increase your experience there and make it a little more unique, and you'll get that local insight that we talked about earlier with the local transportation. Some other just very key tips are never purchase anything that's made from endangered like wildlife, like horns, or any other goods that are made from endangered animals. Pay the fair price. So when we travel, we all like to bargain, and bargaining is fun, and it's healthy. Of course, maybe you'll be getting a price and you'll want to negotiate it down a bit, but be mindful that these are people's livelihoods, and don't participate in overly aggressive bargaining. So maybe you can bargain a bit, but definitely know that there is a fair price, and people on both ends have to make some money. So don't be too aggressive in that. Also, a touchy subject is avoid handing out money to children. You never know the situation of a child, why they're engaged in begging. So just be mindful of that. And if you do feel like donating or helping, or you run into an issue while you're traveling that you feel passionate about, there's a way to go about donating that's a little more mindful. And this could be maybe contacting a local organization that is there year-round, that is helping with this issue that you've figured out, and donating money that way instead of giving handouts to children on the street, because sometimes this can kind of spiral into them continuing to be beggars on the street instead of doing other things, like attending school, for example. And then lastly, when you are traveling, definitely check if tipping is a customary thing. In some countries, a tip is just a tip, as you imagine, but in other countries, a tip is the livelihood of like the servers there. The US is a good example of this. So tipping might not be customary in your home country, but it may be the big chunk of income for service workers in the destination you're visiting. So keep that in mind. All these things really you can gain insight into through a quick Google search. So it's not too complicated, I promise. The next topic is cultural sensitivity. So we kind of mentioned before you go that you should just look into any cultural differences that exist in your destination country. But while you're traveling, you should also keep these things in mind. So the first one is think about your dress code before you're entering specific places, whether they're sacred places, whether they're churches or temples. The way I kind of learn about this is just watching. So I see how the locals are dressed and I just try to imitate that. So if I see that everyone going into this sacred place is covering their shoulders and covering their knees, I am mindful of that and try to be respectful of their culture and follow suit. And following the same theme, always get permission before you're entering places, whether it's like interesting sites along your route, whether it's homes, whether it's cultural sites. If you're not going with a tour, if you're just traveling by yourself, it's super important that you're obtaining proper permissions because culturally things may vary a lot. The land you might be stepping on may be very sacred to specific cultural groups. So it's best not to offend anyone and to make sure you're very thoughtful of what you're doing and where you're visiting. Also, just in general, be conscious of your body language. I can't remember the specific destination, but in some places a peace sign is actually an offensive thing to do. So I know it's super strange from what we're used to back home, but these small things really do make a difference. Also, another example is thumbs up. In some cultures, that's also offensive. So make sure you're just mindful of this and you recognize that you're in a different place than your own home. And then something else that I always love to talk about that fits under kind of social sustainability is taking photos. So I know when I travel, I have like my phone stuck to my hand, and I always want to be ready for this beautiful picture or for something interesting that just happens as I'm moving along in my day. But you should also be very mindful of taking pictures of other people while you're traveling. So just for 1 second, flip it. How would you feel if someone was visiting your home country and they're just filming you or taking 20 pictures of you? I think we could all agree that we'll be pretty annoyed in those moments. So it's the same when you're visiting other destinations. Be mindful that people are going about their daily lives, and that you also wouldn't like someone just snapping pictures of videos of you, going to work or eating lunch. So definitely ask permission if you're going to be taking an image of someone while you're traveling. I'm not saying don't take images of people. I'm just saying try to have that connection beforehand so you're not kind of stepping over lines. And the same goes for children. When you're traveling, there's tons of cute kids and they're super keen to see you as someone who looks different from them. Which is awesome. And in those moments, there's this like cultural connectivity going on, and it's a really beautiful thing. But you should really never take a photo of a child without the permission of their parent or guardian. And if there is no parent or guardian around, you should just not take the photo. So keep that in mind. That's something that I think a lot of people forget about, because when you travel, you're in this vacation state of mind and you just want to capture everything for the gram, but you really should be mindful of taking photos of people and of children especially. And then lastly, when we're talking about cultural sensitivity, just in general, overall, remember that you're a guest in the destination you're visiting. Traveling is an amazing thing, and it's a learning experience, it's a cultural exchange. But it's also something where you're visiting, as I mentioned, completely different place where people live and people can't escape. So just be very mindful that when you are visiting any destination, whether it be close to home or very far on the other side of the world, that you are interacting with a living, breathing community, and you should try to maintain that respect and be very careful and just mindful of how you're interacting with people. All right, so the last section we're going to talk about is being environmentally aware while you're traveling. So we've kind of talked about more of the social and economic side of being a more sustainable traveler. However, there's also a lot of environmental impacts that happen when you visit faraway destinations. So first and foremost, always remove your trash when you're traveling. If you're going hiking, if you're visiting a beach, whatever it may be, make sure you're taking out everything you take in. And also make sure you're disposing of it properly. So if there is recycling in the destination you're visiting, make sure that your plastic's actually finding its way into the recycling bin. If there isn't trash, like trash bins available, or that accessible wherever you are, maybe take it back to your hotel where you can ensure that your trash is actually being disposed of. We all love visiting destinations that are like pristine and clean and beautiful and picturesque, but a part of this is making sure that we're actually disposing of our waste properly when we're visiting those destinations. Another thing is make sure you bring a water bottle. This could be a reusable water bottle, it could be a filtration system water bottle, and this overall just helps you reduce your plastic waste so you're not constantly having to purchase brand new water bottles. In tons of destinations, oftentimes accommodation will have like filtered water systems. So even if you can't drink the water out of the tap, you can fill your bottle with whatever filtered water that they have at the property for tourists. And then on the flip side, if you're going to very remote destinations, you can always buy a water bottle which has a filtration system kind of built into it. And that way you don't have to purchase, 10 water bottles a day. And that just definitely reduces your waste overall. Also, in general, I always recommend skipping the buffet unless you are one of those people who are big eaters. Buffets often generate a lot of waste, and single servings are always a little bit better because you purchase exactly what you're going to eat and there's not all this excess waste being generated. If you do eat somewhere and you have leftovers and you have refrigeration back home, or you're gonna maybe have a snack a little later in the day, ask for a doggy bag where you can take away your leftovers just so you reduce food waste while you're journeying. Next is just being mindful of the resources that you're using. So at the very beginning of this video, we kind of gave the example of water and water scarce areas. So this environmental tip just goes across. It could be for water, electricity. Make sure that you're just mindful of these things when you're traveling. So when you leave your dorm or your hotel, shut the lights off, shut the air conditioning off. Just very small, simple things that you probably already do in your home country. Always stay on designated trails when you're hiking. So even if you're trying to kind of explore the off-beaten path, it's really important that you're kind of staying to the trail. This is also for safety and security, so maybe people can find you if you get lost. But just in general, when you're interacting with the natural environment, staying on trail kind of reduces the damage you do to other ecosystems that might be kind of just beside you on the path. So make sure you're walking on designated trails and you're not creating environmental damage in ecosystems that maybe you're not too familiar with. Cool. The next topic is something you definitely probably are aware of, and that's participating in ethical animal experiences. So when traveling, try to avoid any elephant riding, any really riding wild animals that you would imagine like being in parks. This could also include avoiding animal parks that are not ethical. So there are tons of online articles and certifications where you could kind of gain insight into, is this wildlife park an ethical wildlife park? And if the answer is no, or if you're seeing some scrutiny around some places you're maybe interested in going, maybe rethink whether you should engage in those activities. Because as we said, your money matters, and the things you spend money on really validate or invalidate those experiences. So definitely avoid any wildlife encounters like petting wild animals or riding elephants, or just in general avoid those wildlife parks that are unethical. Next is avoid using harmful sunscreen. So this is a tip that honestly I wasn't too aware of until the last few years. So there are tons of sunscreens out there. If you're at a beach destination, especially one with reefs off the coast, make sure you're getting like reef safe sunscreen. This just reduces the water pollution that's washing off your body when you're kind of bathing in the ocean or in lakes or streams. So yeah, making sure you're purchasing sunscreen that is like eco-certified or reef safe is a really good idea when you're going to be in the water a lot. And last but not least, for the Be Environmentally Aware, make sure you're turning off your devices when you're not using them, just to reduce your electricity. But more than that, I highly recommend that you go offline. And going offline obviously reduces like your CO2 footprint because you're not using electricity. Maybe you go camping, maybe you won't use your devices and need to recharge those devices. But I truly think going offline just kind of elevates your experience. It makes you kind of take some steps away from the life you have back home, from the friends on social media, from the constant scroll on Instagram, and lets you immerse yourself in the moment taking place. And overall, this elevates your experience no matter where you're traveling, no matter who you're traveling with. It will give you that intentional time to kind of slow down and connect. So going offline is a great idea, whether you're trying to be more sustainable in your travels or whether you are just trying to have a more immersive experience overall. And then let's segue into our last section, which is after you get home. So we've gone over what you should do before you go. We've just talked about the things you should consider while you're traveling. But now when you get home, you may think the journey is over. But actually, this is where the journey it begins. And the number one tip I have to give all of you once you get home is to share your experience. Kind of have that dialogue with your friends, with your family, on your social media of the choices you made to be a more sustainable traveler through your journey. And you'll actually be really surprised by how people are inspired by you, or how they learn, or maybe they take away a single tip that you shared. And this truly will create a ripple effect and help you become a more mindful traveler, but also help influence other people to be a more mindful traveler. Remember on top of that all these tips can be applied in your own home country, even if you're taking a weekend trip, maybe to a city nearby. A lot of these things can be integrated into your daily life and on short trips, as well as those longer, more immersive trips that you take. All right, so I have a few of my favorite sustainable items that I like to take with me when I'm going on some longer trips from home. So I'm gonna show those to you guys now. The first thing is a water bottle. So I have two water bottles here. One is just like your standard flask, like water bottle, and the other is this Life Straw water bottle, which actually has a filtration system built in. So when I'm going on just the standard trip, where I know that I can refill my water bottle at my accommodation or stuff like that, I just take my standard water bottle to reduce the waste, to reduce the amount of plastic that I'm generating every day drinking water or drinking other kinds of things. However, if I'm going to be traveling more remote, where I'm maybe a bit unsure if I'm going to be able to access like a water refill station, I always take this Life Straw bottle, and you can actually put any water in this bottle, like river water, really any water, and as you drink it, it filters it. So a water bottle is definitely the number one item that I take on every single trip I go on. The next are these little bags. You can see here. I'm sure you have like a ton of these at home, but they come in these little pouches, and you can actually just take them out like this. And any bag will do, but I just really love the little ones that kind of roll up that you can just stick in your backpack or in your purse. And this is great. I definitely take 1 or 2 bags like this on every single trip I go on, whether it's because I forget my beach bag or if I want to go shopping. That way I don't need to, get a plastic bag. So this is super handy. And then at the end of my trip, I turn this bag into like a dirty laundry bag, or put my shoes in it. And then you just throw it in the wash when you get home. So reusable bag is also something I take on every single trip I go on. If you are trying to kind of progress a little bit further than that, I have some other products. So just some general sun lotion, which is reef safe. This will decrease the amount of pollution going into the water, especially if you're going to be in places where there are coral reefs. Make sure you choose a reef safe sunscreen. It's super important. You can get them online. Really, a lot of sunscreens these days are certified and more eco than some of the other sunscreens that are on sale. So just being mindful of that, especially if you're going to be in and out of the water constantly on your trip. Some other things are like shampoo bars, conditioner bars, soap bars. There are tons of products like this all over the web. So I always go for the ones that come in these tins, and then when I'm done with the product, you can easily refill it, or you can use the tin for something else. So I love taking products like this on my trip, just because they don't leak. You can just throw them in your backpack very easily, and then obviously the packaging is a bit more sustainable. You'll be throwing out less as you kind of journey along. And then we have some more examples of that. But really the sky's the limit. If you do some searching online for eco travel products or just sustainable travel products, you're gonna find a plethora of options. So it's just really finding what works best for you. It could be anything. I mean, you don't need these exact products, but just thinking how you can overall reduce your waste and consumption when you're traveling. So I hope these tips helped you, and that maybe you take one thing from today and try to integrate it into your future travels to become a more mindful traveler. Thank you.